Hi! Better slide deck and rapid prototype. That's the goal with mdeck. So I wanted to streamline the design process. So what does that mean? Let's take a quick look at what it is, the design process, and how we go about solving designs. So first we start with the problem, really articulate what it is that we're trying to solve. We understand who the user is. We try to, understand the competition, paint the landscape, think about constraints and what we're dealing with, and articulate the value proposition. So these are some of the early things that we do when we're trying to design any product. And then we come up with some ideas, and of course sometimes those ideas end up being just some hot air balloon and the hand from above just pops them and lets you know, just make it like Facebook. Of course I digress right here, but a lot of times this is what happens. But let's take a step back. Let's say those ideas are really, really good, and then we work out itself, and then we begin to paint the whole experience. We map out all the wireframes. We build out all the interaction models and all the screens that we'll get interacted with. And we'll put together all the interconnects. So that essentially becomes an early design deck. You explored what the problem is, you painted the landscape, you presented some ideas, and you pushed it together. Now, a lot of times what you do when you come up with an idea and a design is you want to test it. Because at the end of the day, unless you test it and put it in front of users, you're not actually going to know whether it's going to work or not. So we switch into this mode that we call, I'm in proto mode, I'm in prototyping this thing. And we switch into we start writing HTML, some JavaScript, some CSS, and images. We get inundated with HTML. We try to figure out where our float is working, not working, what the CSS structure is like, where the JavaScript is not clicking, how is this coming together. And it becomes more and more complicated. And at a certain point, you completely forget what is the problem that you're trying to solve. You forget about your design because you're really just in the code and really trying to understand, trying to build a prototype that will really resonate with your customers. And at the end, we completely forget that essentially what we're building is a prototype, and this prototype is just going to be tossed away. That the goal of a prototype is nothing more than to give something in front of the user and have them to play with and test, and really so we can get some feedback. And this is essentially the problem that I'm trying to solve. At a certain phase, we go through a very, very complicated experience, and we're trying to really understand the problem. We'll come up with solutions, and it just feels like we're jumping into a moat, and we have to start up all again the battle of rebuilding a prototype. And I wanted to see if I can come up with a way that I can seamlessly go from this notion of a design phase and into the prototype. So essentially, that is what the goal of mdeck. mdeck is really wants to streamline the process from beginning to end. That when you're working on a design deck, that you're also, to some extent, prototyping it. These are not two distinct things that you're jumping between. So to make that happen, I wanted to go around and find some options and really to understand, is there a tool out there that I can leverage? Something that could generate a good concept deck online, something I could prototype with. Something that's very simple, HTML. I could stick it in my Dropbox at work, and then at home, press this keyboard, and I could just pick it up and start working on it again. And I can progressively add fidelity. The more fidelity we add into it, the more details are in there, the more experience becomes more real, and becomes less like a wireframe. And also I wanted something that a code I can understand, something I can quickly update and manipulate. A lot of the tools that I saw out there are fairly complicated, that every time I needed to make a change, it didn't really adapt to what I needed. So this code that I understand, I just decided, I'm just going to write a little plugin. And at the end of the day, this is what mdeck was all about. It's some JavaScript and using jQuery. And the goal of mdeck at the very beginning is just to take a string of div tags, hide all of them, show the first one, and then just jump between one to the next. So essentially think of a slide deck, and all you're doing is moving forward and moving backwards. But a lot of times you want to add a little more interaction. You want to say, what, if user clicks this button on the screen, I want them to go to slide 3. And if user clicks the bottom footer, I want them to go to slide 2. So, this is progressively the code got a little more progressively and more details and got to do a little more function. And after that, I wanted to add this notion of a canvas. At a certain point of the whole experience, you hit a page, and I want that to be your background layer. And you background layer, then you start building upon it. An example, you hit an account list view, and you want to have that sit in the canvas, and you want to be able to experience an overlay right on top of each one of these experiences and put a modal dialog on top. The JavaScript right now, this is the JavaScript, and it might seem complicated, but it's really not. There's a small section in there that deals with, adjusting the screen 16 by 9 in fonts. So this is really the goal of this one, is to deal with presentation. So I can just present stuff straight from a browser, regardless of what screen resolution it is. I can pop it up. There's a section in there of the JavaScript that deals with sliding in and out the divs. And as you can see on the top, it automatically updates the URL. So that's working back and forth. There's some keyboards and anchors. I want to be able to do this with a keyboard back and forth and really go through it fairly quickly. And then the HTML is pretty straightforward. There's just some div, and within each div, I just got to put a class of slide, put the content, and that's it. And it's going to just show a div, hide a div, show a div, hide a div, and move it forward. So, at the end of the day, the value of this tool is just better slides and rapid prototype. So it really doesn't become a very, very complicated experience to go from one to the other. And that is mdeck. And I'll put together another video to talk about some examples I did with mdeck. One of them being is the Salesforce tablet experience. Thanks. Bye.